Hey, what's up, guys? This is part 2 of the multiplayer first-person shooter series. In this episode, we will be replicating the sprint and walk, and then working on turn and place after that, and the head rotation, and looking up and down, and getting both of those replicated as well. If we have enough time at the end of that, we will do some retargeting to the Unreal 5 mannequin. First thing we're going to do is navigate back to our character here. And this is where we have to sprint and walk. Just move this over a little bit. We're going to work on the sprinting first. Okay, so to replicate, things can be a bit tricky. First, most of the stuff that you're trying to replicate needs to be ran through the server. And sprinting in this case is one of those things. So first we'll make a custom event, and we'll call it server sprint. On the input, we will add a boolean, so I'll leave this default, and we'll just check is sprinting will be the name of it. And we'll put a branch here to check true or false. Okay, so if we're sprinting, if true, we will set the max speed to 600, and if false, we will set it back to our jog speed. And on the custom event we made, we want to make sure that it replicates on the server. Well, actually, this one will be multicasted. This is the client. And then we need another custom event for the server. We'll call this one client on the first one, because it's the client. We'll get a server sprint, and this one will run on server. And the server is basically going to call the client sprint, and let me just plug this in to add it. Yeah. So either drag it over and drop it, or you can click on it and add it the way we did on the first one. So put that in there like that. And then on the input, we're going to make a variable here. Boolean is sprint key down. You can call it whatever. You can call it is sprinting, whatever you like. And if you drag it out and hold Alt and release, you'll get a set. And while it's selected, Control D to duplicate. When pressed, we want to set true. When released, false. On the true, we want to call server sprint, and we're going to duplicate server sprint and have it plug into the release as well. And we'll just plug this in like so, and so it's looking for a true or false, and this is what is setting the true or false and running it through the server, and the server is running it through the client, telling the client to sprint, which is replicating it to all clients because it's multicasted. And that should be our sprint done. So select all, press C to comment, and let's call it sprint. Make it a little bit bigger. I'm going to comment these as well. So, client, server, and this here is the input. You can set colors on these if you want. You can select multiple comments. This one here doesn't want to be selected. change the colors. The main one here, I like to show the bubble and also color the bubble, so when I'm zoomed out, I know where it is. And then the walking is basically set up exactly the same way, but first we're going to compile this, set it to number of players 2 and play as client. Get 2 of them in here, and the sprinting is being replicated. But if I walk, you see the character that's walking is stuttering, but he's still jogging because we haven't replicated walk yet. But sprinting seems to be fine so far. Sprinting and jogging is okay. So sprint done, we'll do the same thing for this. So if you just hold Alt and click on the wires, it'll disconnect them. Drag this down here, create a custom event, and we'll make sure to name this one properly. So client walk and multicast. Get a branch here and just drag this into it to create it, but condition will be is walking this time. And if true, set 200 walk speed. If false, go back to 400 jog speed. Another custom event, and this one will be for the server. So server underscore walk. Make sure this gets ran on server. So we got multicast being replicated to all, and then the server. So again, the server is going to call client walk. So make sure you select walk here, and plug this in to get to this walking boolean, or add the pin manually. Again, we will need to create a variable for walking, so Control D to duplicate this, and just change sprint to walk. Okay, drag it out again, holding Alt to release, to set, duplicate. On the first one, we want to set true. Get them plugged in here. And we'll call server walk and duplicate it. And again, it's looking for the boolean that we're setting to either true or false. Just make sure they're all plugged in. Let's comment this, call it walk, do the bubble, color bubble. Resize it just so we can get some comments in here. Alright, so this is our input. A server. Yep. And then client. And I'm just gonna select. Okay, it's bugging again. Let's change into preferred color. We got sprint and walk. Let's compile it. Look over, make sure I'm not forgetting anything. Looks good. Let's hit play. We got sprint, and let's try and walk. We're not jittering anymore. We're walking, and it's replicating. Alright, so walk and sprint replication is done. Let's work on turn in place. So to get started with the turn in place, we need to make sure we grab the turn left and turn right animations. We will create a blend space 1D, and we're going to select the mannequin that we're using, and we'll call it blend space turn in place, and open that up. We will need I guess it's a direction, but we're going to call it rotation. We're going to set it to 0.1 and 0.1. Those are the values I found to work well. I think this is the speed of your mouse, so if you want it to move faster or slower, adjust these here. I'm also going to snap them to grid. Alright, so left will be left, and turn right 90 will be on the right. And we need our idle animation, which is called secondary motion if you're following along using the same animations. So on the left, rotating left, on the right, rotating right. Center, we are idle. That is, I think that's all we need here. We can close this. But we're going to open up the animation blueprint. To the animation graph here. We need to go to the event graph actually. Once again, copy the is valid check, pull off the sequence on our update animation, and this is where we set our direction and speed from last episode. Pull off the sequence, and if you don't have these, you just press add pen. Plug it into there. And we need one more thing here. If we find the camera input is what we're looking for, there we go. And drag it up, make some room. And we need left and right, because turn place is going to be going off of look left and look right. And drag this out, and off the axis value, we'll promote this to a variable and call it turn rate. And just plug this in here. Inside of the player here, and pull off of this and get turn rate. And again, promote this to variable. Call it set turn rate. And compile. Inside the anim graph, we'll go into the locomotion state machine. Yes, we can right click and add state, or pull off and add state. And we'll call this turn place. And we will need a to and a from, so we can transition back and forth. First, we are going to work on the to transition, and we will first check that our speed, so get speed, or drag it out, hold control, whichever way you want to go about it. Let's make sure it is equal to 0. And something else that we're going to set up here in a second. So compile this and save for now. Let's plug it in so it's not yelling at us. Alright, and what we're going to need here is a variable for rotation. So we'll call it rotation, and it will be of type rotator. And I'm going to replicate it by making sure you have it selected, and then the detail panels, select the replication dropdown and select replicated. We're going to need to make a function here. So, okay. Rotation. Alright, and inside the look at rotation, we are going to grab our character ref. And first, check if it's valid. And also, we want to grab our camera. So it's called follow camera. Let's actually rename that to FPP underscore camera for first person perspective, because we will be adding first and third person camera, and the third person would be for like debugging, because this is a first person tutorial. So at the end of this one, maybe in the next episode, we'll be setting up the camera stuff for first person, but not in this one. I'll compile that there. Let's make sure. Okay. No, I don't think anything's using it there. So now we can drag off this and get camera, should be at the bottom. Get first person perspective camera. We're going to get the world location. This one here. Let's bring this down a little bit. We're also going to get the mesh. So this is the mesh of the character. And so we're grabbing the mesh, and first actually let's check the camera as well. So get another is valid, make sure the camera is valid. On the mesh, we're just going to get a socket location, and the socket we're looking for is the head. So if we go here, click on the mesh, open up the skeletal mesh, and in the skeleton tree, I'm pretty sure it's just called head. Yeah, so we're just going to type it in exactly like that. There's no caps. And from the socket location, we want to find look at rotation. And this will be our start location here. And the target is going to be the world location plus a value. And we'll make a rotate vector. And on the X and Z, we will add 5,000 and 500. And this is just getting the X is our forward of our character. So we're going out, what is this, 5,000 centimeters, I think. Unreal uses centimeters, right? And it's just what we're looking at. And the Z is just to, keep the character's head from looking down. Like it, I don't know. It was the values I found that worked well for me. If I left this at 0, the character's head was kind of looking down more than what my mouse was looking at. No, these work for me. You can play with these, figure out what works for you. The rotator here. So this is looking for our rotator, and we did make it here, but I don't think we need this here. Did I set this anywhere? No, I didn't. So apologies for that. We don't put the rotation here. It needs to go in the character. So back over to the character, we're going to create a function. And what are we going to call it? What are we looking for again? It's the rotation, right? Rotator. So we'll call this function get rotation, or get a rotation, however you want to name it. And the first thing we'll do inside of here is get a branch, and then check has authority. and also is locally controlled. And get a or boolean. So we're checking if the user has authority or is locally controlled. Then we can continue. So if these are true, we will create that variable here, call it rotation, and make it a rotator. And we will set it here if true. And what we're going to set it to is get the control rotation. And we need to get the controller. And the target of the controller is the pawn, and that's what's getting plugged into here. Oh. Get control rotation of the controller is what we need. So not the pawn's control rotation, but the pawn's controller control rotation. Right? And this is what we're setting the rotation to. And that is our function done. So off the character ref, we can get rotation. And one more thing, we need to make sure it's replicated over here. To replicate it, compile this. Alright, so we get the look at rotation. We're going to take the rotator here and split the structure pin, because we only want to pull off the pitch here. And this is getting us ready for the looking up and down as well. So let's actually first set it with a clamp, so we have a maximum up and down. And values I found to work well for me are -15 and +35. Okay, now that we got our clamp set up, we need to multiply this value. So multiply. And it's going to be inverted if we plug it in. If we set the rotator, so what are we doing? We do need a rotation, so we're going to call it, we're going to have a few of these, so this one's going to be called rotation ahead. And it will be replicated. But we're going to split the pin here and multiply this by a value of -1. And if not, your look will just be inverted. But that's for later. So we're going to plug this into the yaw, because that's what we're looking for, is left and right. That's yaw. Pitches up and down, and then roll would be like leaning left and right. So into the off of the valid, I'm just going to set it. Compile. And we don't have a target, so we just need to make sure we plug this in here. Again, the values 5,000, 0, and 500 is what worked well for me. -15, 35. You can play with these numbers. If yours, for whatever reason, happens to be backwards, just skip this here and plug it directly in. But back to the transition, so the anim graph, the locomotion, and the transition 2 are turned in place. The and, we need to get our head rotation and just say not equal okay. We're gonna split it first. We're gonna get the yaw. make sure that that's not equal because we need a float. And just check if it's not equal to 0. And 0 just means we're not moving. And if it's not equal to 0, it means we're moving. So let's go back 1 into the locomotion and set up the transition back to our locomotion from turn in place. And that one there is going to check if our speed is greater than 0.1 or 1. Set it to something low so it knows that if you're moving, don't turn in place. So I think we can check this. No, we didn't plug it in. So turn in place is empty. We need to add that blend space here. And plug in the turn rate. But we need to divide the turn rate. So drag off and divide. I'm going to divide it by 2. Yeah, I think 2 is what worked for me. Alright, all that's done. And it's still not working. Alright, it should work, technically. Do need to... Okay, we are setting it, but we're not doing anything with it. So let's just find some space here. And this is in the character blueprint. And we're going to search for tick. And on the tick, we just want to plug in that get rotation that we made. That's strange. Alright, so I think I found the issue here. And the character ref, what we actually need to do is cast to, I think it's called third person, okay. Cast to our character, or whatever your character is called, cast to it, and this in here, check thoughts valid, actually just hold control, drag off this and plug it in, drop it on there. Can remove this, put the object, we will plug in here, and let's actually call it character, and instead of object we are going to type actor and get an actor object reference. We should plug in there. We compile this, and I think it's our event graph. We need to get to look at rotation here, plug it in, and our character, we need to plug into the character there. I think that should fix it. There we go. Alright, so we're turning in place when we're going right, move steps right, move left, move steps left. Again, I don't think this is going to work if we were to replicate it. So number of players and client. Alright, see it's working for the one screen, but it's not replicating. So to fix that, we're going to go back to the event graph here, and we'll just disconnect this. We'll set this down here. And what we're going to do is create another custom event. It's going to be called server underscore turn rate, or whatever you like to call it, and it's going to execute on server. Plug this in here, and we're going to grab this float value of our turn rate and plug it in. So we're going to call this server in here we will call it, so server turn rate, and we're looking for this to plug in. Clean this up a little bit, and we still need to plug this in over here. So double click the wire to add a reroute, and now it should run through the server. So let's check it. Awesome, it's actually not working at all. Don't forget to plug something in. Yeah. So let's let replicated on the turn rate as well. And you see, it is working now. Well, fun little debugging experience there. Sorry about that. So we'll just comment this one as well so we know that it's pulling from the server. Alright, what's next? The head rotation. So let's get that set up. So if we navigate back over to the animation blueprint, let's go to the anim graph here. We're actually going to disconnect this, bring it up a little bit, and if we pull off of it, we can save the cache pose of it. So as our locomotion, we're just saving a pose. So we can name this locomotion. And then I think we can just type in locomotion and use it. And then from here, I think we can do I'm going to right click and get transform. Transform modify bone. Alright, so with it selected, I'm actually going to turn off the pins minus rotation. So leave rotation, can disable the others. And we will plug in our rotation head. And for the bone to modify, we will search head here. Plug it in. It'll translate it local to component. And give it some space here to do the same. Component back to local. And what's it saying? No components to modify. Okay. So rotation mode, we need to add to existing, and I think bone space. Alright, so the head is looking up and down, getting some foot jitter from the turn in place. We will adjust that in a few. Let's make some space here. We're actually going to duplicate this here. Just going to show an example of how you can manipulate this for other bones than the head. So I'm going to give an example of a spine rotation as well. So let's duplicate this and call it rotation spine. And we'll plug that in here. And it's going to use the same exact settings. The rotation, add to existing on bone space, but we want to find the spine that we want to modify. I'm going to use spine 3, which is the highest spine, closest to the head. So if I conical, yeah, okay, so spine 3, and then neck, then head. So this is the closest to the head, so I'm going to rotate that bone as well. I'll compile, but back in the lookout rotation, we're just going to duplicate some of these. We'll grab the spine, set it, and split. And just come off the end execution and put in the input here. And we will grab those. And we'll set the same start and the same end location. But we will make it a little bit different for this on the clamp. So instead of 35, we'll make it -15 to 15 on the spine. We don't want it to bend as much as the head. And let's plug that into the yaw. Alright, we have there we go, that might help. Just be sure to plug it in. Alright, so now we got a little bit of bending in the spine as well, but as you see the arms, they're moving, so basically we want to get left arm and right arm. So once again, duplicate. So rotation arm L and duplicate rotation arm R. And we will duplicate the bone. Make sure we plug it in this time. And then arm L and arm R. So this one, let's set to arm, and we'll use upper arm L, and arm R, we will use upper arm R. And once again, we shall go into the function here and duplicate this twice. Drag out both of these and set by holding left alt and releasing. Connect them to each other and split the structure. And plug it into the yaw on each of those. And 15 and 15 is fine. You do want the arms to look like you want them to rotate a little bit. Make sure you also plug in the start and the ends. But I guess you could set this to smaller if you didn't want them to move at all. You set them to 0 maybe? I haven't tried that, but 15, -15, and 15 work for me for both. So let's see what that looks like. Well, arms do move a little bit. They'll get wider as you look up, but they don't go forward as much now. Alright, I know I did something to fix the foot jittering, but I'll address that in a bit. For now, I know we've got a sprinting issue. If you've been following along, you may have noticed. If you're sprinting and start moving other directions, we can still sprint. And as you see, we don't have directions set up for sprint speed. Where would that be? In our locomotion, this here. Sprint speed is at 600. When we're sprinting, we are just setting the speed to be 600. And we don't have anything for these directions here. So anything to the left and right, it just kind of bugs out. So what we need to do is in the character, we're going to set up another function. And what this function is going to do is basically check our sprint direction. And that's it. If we're sprinting, so it's going to have a branch in here checking if we're sprinting. And if we are sprinting, we want to determine if we're pressing anything other than our forward. So if we're going any direction other than forward, we want it to, not sprint, basically. Go back to jog speed. So sprint key down, that's the first thing we'll check. And let's actually rename the function to check sprint speed. And here we will get another branch, because if it's true, if we are sprinting, we need to do another check. To do that, we need to get our get right. Okay, yeah, get our move right and left. And this is our axis in here, so move right and left. It's our A and D. And A is left, so -1, and +1 for move right. So we need to, how are we going to do this? Check if it's not equal to 0, because if it's -1, that means we're moving left, and if it's 1, we're moving right. So 0 would be the neutral pose of center. So if it's not equal to center, if that is true, that means we're not running straight forward. So you could do it equal here. You can say is equal to 0 if you want to come off the true for the code, but that's not where I'm going to do it. I'm going to set not sprinting here by calling the server sprint, and we will leave this false. So before we had something like a boolean to plug into it. So if the sprint key's down, but this way we're just gonna set it false. Just leave it unchecked. And if false here, we're gonna do another branch. So come into here, you can hold B and click to get a branch. And this one is going to check for the forward. So you need to get, I think it was called move forward. Yeah, move forward backwards. And this is the first one. So if we press left or right while sprinting, it'll go back to jog speed. This one here is our forward and back, so we just need to say if it's not equal to 1. Again, the forward and back also in here. Forward backwards. W is 1, saying forward. S is -1, saying backwards. Character, we're checking it if it's not equal to 1. So if we are equal, so the false is saying not equal, so coming off of this saying it is equal to 0, meaning we're not moving left or right. This is where we can execute our sprint, but we also need to make sure that we are only moving forward on the forward and backwards axis. That way we can't sprint backwards. Go. And we'll duplicate this twice actually, plug it into both. And on the false here, so if it's not equal to false, meaning it is equal to 1, and again, the 1 on the forward and backwards is W, which would be forward. So if it is, we are sprinting, so we're just going to set server sprint. And I think that fixes that issue. So use the big screen here. So sprinting, if I hold right, it didn't work. Why is that? Again, we need to plug it into the tick. So just add it to the string, or hold S and click, make a sequence. And have it execute through a sequence like so. Whichever way you want to go about it works. But now if we press any direction while holding sprint, it will not sprint in those directions unless it's forward only. Alright, looking good. Looking up and down. And we'll work on that jitter. That's really easy to do actually. If we just go to the blend space turn in place that we made, in the asset details panel, On our axis settings, we will find smoothing time. Let's put that to like 0.5, and then these can stay default. Go back in here. Alright, so looking up and down seems to be a lot smoother, not getting any jittering lags. Turn place is working. Sprint's only working when forward, defaulting back to jog speed. Further directions. Walking's fine. Alright, looking good. Next episode, I'll probably do the camera stuff, so switching to the true first-person camera, getting all that set up, and probably adding in a third-person camera for debugging, or if you want to use third-person as well, I'll be setting up a button to toggle between the two, and yeah, so until then guys, appreciate you guys watching.